Powerslave, or Exhumed as it was known in Europe, was a first-person shooter that released in 1996 for the Sega Saturn and MS-DOS and in 1997 for the PlayStation. The North American title was actually in reference to the 1984 Iron Maiden album of the same name, and just like that album's cover, the game had an ancient Egyptian theme as you play as a member of a crack team sent into the Valley of Karnak to investigate an otherworldly disturbance. Nightdive Studios are just about to release a remastered version of this ancient Egyptian themed shooter, this time named Powerslave Exhumed, on the Nintendo Switch. But is playing it a fair old time, or is it just a pain in the Anubis? I'm Glen Bolger, thank you to Nightdive for the review code, and now let's find out. So as alluded to in the intro, the story in Powerslave revolves around the Egyptian city of Karnak being seized by unknown forces. As a member of a crack military team, you are sent in to investigate, only for your helicopter to be shot down, leaving you separated from your team. Finding yourself under attack from both otherworldly creatures and manifestations of ancient Egyptian foes, you are guided by the spirit of King Ramses to try and eradicate the threat. In terms of the gameplay, this is a first-person shooter and follows a lot of the tropes of the games from the era which it originally came out. You'll begin with just a knife to defend yourself, but it won't be long before you find a handgun, and there are a few larger, more powerful weapons to find on your way. Once you have a weapon, you keep it even if you die, and ammunition comes by way of weapon power pickups generally found in pots or spawning after killing an enemy. They will top up the ammo of whichever gun you have equipped at the time. It's good to get used to switching weapons around to ensure they are all topped up when you find these items, and health refills are found in a similar way. Levels are generally made up of a series of corridors and conjoining rooms accessed via doors, again fairly standard stuff, and some doors will need to be unlocked before you can access them. Keys come in the shape of a few gold items that you will find, such as the symbol of war, symbol of time for example, and these will allow you to open the corresponding doors once you come across them. There is an element of verticality to the structure of levels due to the ability to jump, which is performed by pressing the ZL button, and this allows for some platforming sections too. The depth of field when judging a jump can feel a bit off to begin with platforms that look way out of reach actually being accessible with a bit of effort, and it just takes a period of acclimatization. There is also some light puzzle solving, usually revolving around hitting switches to disable lasers or trying not to activate traps. What does differentiate Powerslave from its contemporaries is how it almost has a bit of a Metroidvania feel to it. Whilst within the levels themselves you will naturally do a bit of backtracking as you find keys for doors as I mentioned just now, what Powerslave also does is have you finding new abilities such as a pair of sandals that increase how high you can jump, or a mask that allows you to swim underwater for extended periods of time. Ramses will then send you back to previous levels which now have an area that you can access owing to your newfound ability. This will lead to an alternative exit which will then lead you on to the next level. It's nice to come across a game you missed out on back in the day which on the surface appears to follow the well-trodden path, but when you play it you find it actually has a unique trait, and whilst it does help keep things fresh in some respects, it also means seeing a lot of the same levels as you return to them, albeit of course from a slightly different perspective. Now in terms of this new version of the game, from what I understand, it's a hybrid of both the Saturn and PlayStation versions. Although having never played either version, I'm not really able to give a huge amount of insight as to what made the cut from each one. From what I've read at least, level layouts were different between the two versions due to some of the architecture from the Saturn version not being well suited to the PlayStation technology, and most other differences it seems relate to some of the power-ups only being in the Saturn version. Another point I want to mention is that there was a hidden game which was included in that Saturn version, at least in some regions, called Death Tank. This was unlockable by finding all of the collectibles known as Team Dolls during your playthrough, but as I've not been able to do this, I cannot confirm if this is still in the game or not. I did reach out to Nightdive for confirmation but have not yet had a reply, so if I do hear back from them once the review is live, I will update the top pin comment with confirmation. Control wise, you have the option of standard analog controls or gyroscopic aiming. I found that using this option with the joycons was incredibly twitchy. You can adjust the sensitivity of course, although I could just never really find a sweet spot. Using the Pro controller or the Switch itself in handheld mode and moving these themselves to refine my aim worked much better for me and felt very natural. Gameplay is very similar to most first-person shooters of the time, but with the acquisition of items allowing for a Metroidvania type twist. A lack of variety in enemies, at least initially, and a map that could have done with an upgrade are a couple of the negatives, but on the whole it scores 16 out of 20. Controls work well, although you'll need to find the system that suits you best, and they also score 16 out of 20. When it comes to the visuals, Powerslave Exhumed has that classic look of 2D character sprites in 3D rendered environments, which was used in the majority of first-person shooters in the 90s on 32-bit consoles. The setting itself does lead to some interesting levels, with the early sun-drenched stages eventually subsiding to a darker, more decadent style. As with most of Nightdive's remasters or re-releases of games from the 90s, it uses the Kex engine, and you can definitely see how much crisper the game looks when compared to the original releases. Plus there are a number of options available to you in the menus with regard to visuals, such as the ability to turn anti-aliasing off, alter the resolution and apply a CRT filter. HD rumble can be turned off, and checkpoints can also be deactivated should you wish for more of a challenge. Performance wise, things are running at 60 frames per second, both in docked and handheld as far as I could see, although I did experience occasional dropped frames at times. They never affected the gameplay, but they were there and need highlighting nonetheless. In terms of the audio, things begin in quite a traditional manner, with the music having a heavy emphasis on percussion, string and wind instruments, but things do ramp up to have a metal sound to them as you progress, in fitting with the fact that the title is in reference to an Iron Maiden song, as I mentioned earlier. It does this though while still using some of those traditional instruments, predominantly things like the flute. It makes for a very interesting juxtaposition, which matches the ancient Egyptian meets modern technology theme of the game well. Narration is used at times and was actually provided by movie trailer icon Don LeFontaine, who sadly passed away in 2008. If you've ever seen a trailer for a movie which begins with the words "in a world," then chances are you know LeFontaine's work.
Even the mummified body of the great King Ramses was unearthed and taken away. You have been chosen from a group of the best operatives in the world to infiltrate Karnak.
Needless to say, he brought the gravitas and Hollywood spin to the story narration that makes this feel like a 90s action movie a la Stargate. Some of the voice acting, of which there isn't much, is a bit too quiet. Ramses in particular was very hard to hear, which made it difficult to know where you were being sent to next, although the game places you in the correct level on the overworld map, so it's never a huge problem, just a bit disappointing in terms of keeping that Hollywood persona going. Visuals, while still looking their age, definitely look cleaner and exude a nice amount of charm. They score 16 out of 20. Audio is quite frankly one of the highlights of the game and scores 19 out of 20. Powerslave Exhumed costs £15.89 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. For this price there are 20 levels plus 2 possible endings to strive for based on a certain type of collectible you need to get. The main point to consider is that there are a huge amount of first person shooters available on the Switch from a similar time. You have things such as Doom 1 and 2, Doom 64 of course, Turok 1 and 2, Duke Nukem 3D and Quake. And most of these are a lot cheaper, at least half price if not more. The fact that this is a lot less linear in design does help it to an extent, but even so I'd still be inclined to choose one of the much cheaper offerings if I could only pick one. It will lose marks here for value, not due to a lack of quality, but more down to a failure to be more competitive in what is quite a well stocked market. It gets 13 out of 20. To conclude, Powerslave Exhumed is a good first-person shooter to this day. I have absolutely zero nostalgia for this game and very much enjoyed my time with it, even when judging it by today's standards. The inclusion of quality of life features such as gyroscopic aiming helped to modernise it, and the less linear nature differentiates it from its peers. It is a fair bit more expensive than some of its contemporaries, and even with that slightly different angle, this does make it harder to recommend, but judged on its merits in terms of gameplay, there's definitely a lot to like here. Powerslave Exhumed gets a SwitchUp score of 80%. Thank you everybody for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. A quick thank you to our Patreons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.